I just wanted to provide a brief trigger warning that this episode does touch lightly on the conversation of suicide.
We do have the ability to shift. We are not at the mercy, however it may feel like we are, until we realize that we have the capability that even though the mind cannot discern the difference, what are we feeding it? Can we feed it things that improve it? So part of the psychoeducation is what we're eating, what we're thinking, what we're watching, what we're reading, where are we dancing, how are we singing, what are we smelling? Get all those senses of making us feel good starts to deactivate. And that's very, very key. That's so, so key.
You're listening to the Beyond the Bliss podcast with your host, me, Danny. Beyond the Bliss is a lifestyle and wellness podcast that was created straight from my heart. You can expect to hear conversations from experts and guides and teachers along the way who will not only share relatable perspectives that will help you feel validated in your own experiences, but also tools for knowledge and wisdom that we can individualize to fit our own lives in the best way that makes the most sense and feels the most right for us. I'm honored that you're here. It truly means the world to me. Thank you so much for tuning in, and let's dive right into the episode. Hey guys, welcome back. Thank you for tuning in. I always get so excited to welcome you back in here each week. I think maybe it's my Aquarian nature, but I just love all of the different realms and different topics and different avenues we can venture on together. I love having things that change and are just something new and exciting each week. So today we are learning from a beautiful lady named Carmel. I was introduced to her from one of my guests here at Beyond the Bliss podcast. For my human design junkies out there like me, she is a 6/2 manifester, so very incredible, and she's kind of coming into her third cycle. So she's almost coming into that third phase of her sixth line. So she's just got a lot of wisdom and knowledge to share. Carmel wears many different hats, from being a psychic medium to a therapist, many different things. But today we are talking about the topic of EMDR therapy. So if you've heard of that before, maybe you haven't. It was my first time ever learning about the specific therapy. And it's a therapy that's helping a lot of people heal from trauma. Any type of trauma, complex traumas, small traumas, PTSD, anything you can really think of. And EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. So it's basically a form of psychotherapy that was developed in the 80s, so it's fairly new, but there's a lot of research to support the success around this type of therapy and how it's helping people heal from trauma. So it's totally different than talk therapy. It is all based around these eye movements. So if you're more interested in like what goes into this therapy, how it was created, how the sessions are conducted, you of course can reach out to Carmel, because I will put all of her information below. But she also recommended a few very interesting books, very informative books around EMDR therapy, around trauma. And I'm going to put them all in the show notes below with direct links to Amazon. So you can just click on those and purchase them if you feel called to. So Carmel and I kind of just dive right into talking a little bit about her journey. And just to kind of preface this, she does briefly talk around the topic of suicide. So for those that this may be something a little bit too triggering, we just wanted to kind of provide that as a forward, as a courtesy to let you know. We talk a little bit about her journey, and then we go into kind of trauma and just sharing a lot of science. And this was a really fun episode for me. I learned a lot just being the interviewer. So thank you guys for being on this journey with me, for opening your minds, for expanding. I can't wait for you to experience Carmel. Check out all of her information below. She does do free consultations if you're interested in working with her or just learning more about therapy yourself to work with somebody else. No harm. She gives tips on how to find the right practitioner for you in this episode. So make sure you just give it a listen, and I will kind of dive right into reading off my review of the week. As you guys know, I've been starting to give you guys some shout outs, and I do invite you to get a little more vulnerable on your reviews rather than just telling me what you love about me or the podcast. Let me know why something on the podcast helped you, what it opened your mind to, why you were interested in this topic. Let's hear a little bit about your life if you're feeling open enough to share with me. I can't wait to learn more about you guys. But for now, let's get into this week's review from the lovely Rachel Daly. She says, if you're like me, you want to take control of your own healing. Danny shares some amazing tools to do just that with every single episode. I feel empowered to do the inner work and become my highest self. Thanks, Danny. And thank you, Rachel. That's literally what my intention was for this podcast, is to just empower you all with the tools to go on expanding in your own life, to not just turn to me or turn to the person on the episode that week and always be searching outside of yourself for guidance. I want you to just always feel guided to turn on whatever it is that your soul wants to hear when it comes to the episodes in this show. And just pick up tools where you need them. Listen to other people's perspectives. Make things your own. You know what's going to work for you. You know you best. So feel empowered, not just through this podcast, through every choice and every decision that you're making. Look around you. Take things in. You have the power. You just need the tools, or you need to look inside and remember that the tools are already there. So I love you guys so much. I can't wait for you to hear this episode. Make sure you're following me at Beyond the Bliss podcast if you aren't already. Let's dive right into the episode. Here we go.
So thank you. Just that, really.
Thank you. First of all, I wanted to thank you for filling out my form. And for the listeners, when I do have someone who wants to join in with me on an episode, I ask my guest to fill out a form that I guess my way is a little less conventional. I don't really know because I don't have any podcaster friends or people to compare it to. But I think probably the more conventional way would be, giving you a list of certain questions and preparing you. But since I like to kind of just go intuitively, I mean, that form is really just a deep dive into who you are. And so when my guests do fill those out, I appreciate it because I love reading people's stories. And I think that above anything else, I mean, you are certified and you have credentials of many things, but your story, I think, is what is the most captivating and can
Life University, right? That's the PhD. For sure. Thank you.
I mean, I'm open to talking about so many things because I think anything like in this life for you and your experience is really interesting, and it could definitely open up some avenues in other people's minds into like what they're going through. But maybe we can start by you just kind of letting people know who you are and what you do as like some of your life's work.
Sure. Well, I mean, if we go back maybe how I came to be the therapist that I am today, would that be maybe helpful just to give some insight? Because a lot of people don't start off. I mean, some do. Some are born into the world and have that, I want to be a therapist flag. I certainly didn't have that. I was quite an isolated child just due to my family experiences and the type of family I was born into. So I found my imagination was a place to escape to. And I would lose myself often in my mind creating storylines, and I used to dance around my dining room table with imaginary friends, and we would sing and dance and perform. So my first love was actually the love of theatre. And my mother had been in that world, but she'd been an opera singer and had a really hard time of it. So was not in any way, shape or form happy for her daughter to enter into that world, and did everything possible to deter me, even though my beautiful prof at school had even gone round and spoken to my parents and said, please put Carl on the stage. But to be fair to them, they were not having any of it, and they kind of redirected me to do something else very creative, which was to go into hairdressing. And my father had been a hairdresser, his father before him and his father before him. So it was a generational thing as well as an ancestry thing. And I knew I was very good at it because I do my dolly's hair, and they used to look very fancy when we'd sit down and have tea together. So I did that, and I went into the profession to please and appease my family. And a lot of people who know me see me as this very strong character. So they are kind of confused that I would have done that rather than stepped out and said, absolutely not, I'm going to the theatre, I'm going to do what I love. But I knew very early on that my mother was very fragile. So I didn't want to cause any more distress or upset in the family. So I honoured them, and luckily for me, they had the foresight and the insight to take me to the West End of London, where I started my apprenticeship with some of the top salons in the world. So within, I think it certainly was in a very short time, I realised that there wasn't just this thing called salon life. There was a whole other world called the editorial life, or the fashion life, where you could be a hairdresser and you could get to do catwalk shows and magazines and advertising campaigns and pop videos. So in a way, I did find an outlet for creativity, even though I was behind the camera, working with some of the most famous and extraordinary people that have walked the planet. So in many ways, I was very blessed, really, really blessed. And I did live a very rich life until life finally caught up with me, and I recognised that I wasn't fulfilled and that I'd been able to suppress it for long enough. And then I think the models got younger, the hairstyles started to repeat themselves, and I became very bored. And I knew that I wasn't really using a lot of my intellect at that time. I was just using a part of my creativity. And I think this happens to a lot of us, to be honest. It's the dark night of the soul, where we try and avoid the kind of inevitable, if you like, where we become very, very unhappy. And we act out. I certainly acted out in a particular way, where I started to numb myself using any kind of medication and that was, of course, drugs, as a way of coping. And of course, it has now informed my therapeutic practice immensely. So I often say to my people, whatever happens in life, however difficult it may appear and however devastating it may appear, it gives us an opportunity at some point to work through it and come through it and find the gifts and the beauty that lies in the tragedy of life, if you like. And I was really blessed to, it's a weird thing to say, but I was actually blessed to have psychosis and a nervous breakdown, which was caused by the suppression of my feelings and the many nights of taking too many substances to avoid those feelings. And one night, the inevitable did happen. So I had a breakdown, and I knew at that point I had to leave the industry, but I had no clue what I could or couldn't do. And I really was lost, Danny, at that point. I felt completely lost. I had no qualifications. I wasn't good for anything else. I had only ever known that. So I really thought that I needed to end my life. I actually believed that would be an option that was the only option available to me. I couldn't actually see another way at that time. And I lived in London, and I had access to a roof terrace. So this particular day, when it was very dark within my mind and my heart, I went and stood on top of the building to take my own life. So again, not only do I have a great understanding about drugs and how they affect us, but I also have an understanding about suicidal ideation. And I stood there looking out over London town, and I just thought, well, I don't actually really want to die, but I really, really, really want to stop the pain and the excruciating agony that I was feeling. So I literally went to jump, and at the second before I went to jump, I heard a voice. And this voice said very, very clearly, how do you know it will be better if you jump? Now, that is not what you want to hear when you're about to take your own life. And even now, I'm not completely sure whether it was my heart, my higher self, my spirit, or some other aspect of life giving me that question. All I know is I heard it loud and clear, and all I know is it stopped me in my tracks. And I knew I couldn't jump because there was no way I was going to put myself in any construct of purgatory forever. That was what it was implying. I didn't know it would be better, and I couldn't take that risk. So I jumped back down and went into my apartment, and I really did sit there for hours and hours, reflecting on the question, reflecting on my life, the potential death that had been avoided, and what to do. And then this light bulb moment of, well, if I'm not going to jump to my death, I'm going to jump to my life. And it almost didn't matter at that point what I did, because I'd got so close to death that I knew I could get so close to life. And there was a globe, one of those spinning globes opposite. And I just said, right, I'm going to spin it, and wherever it stops, that's where I'm going to go. And I did that very thing, and it landed in the Caribbean Sea, but the nearest landmass was Venezuela. So I sold everything. I sold everything that I owned, and I went off to Venezuela to quote unquote find myself. So in some ways, it's, as I say, dark night of the soul becomes the light day of the sun, if you like, or the light day of the soul. Because if we can and are able to transition, then something else extraordinary happens. And it's almost like, it felt like life applauded me. It's the only way I can say it. Because then things started to manifest, synchronicities started to happen. The people opposite, the two doctors, moved to Cambridge, and they sublet their apartment to a Venezuelan. And I'd never met a Venezuelan. And he was able to give me one number. And that number of this woman in Caracas opened a myriad of doors. And on the second day I was in Venezuela, I was given a first edition copy of The Alchemist by a beautiful photographer, Susanna Chapard, who I met there. And again, she said to me when she'd heard my story, oh, you are like Santiago. And of course, I didn't know who Santiago was. And she said, no, well, my agent's just been given this book, so I want you to read it. And of course, I read it, but I hadn't completed my story like Santiago. At the end of the book, had come back to his beginning to find himself. I was still out there in the wilderness trying to discover the whats, the hows, the whens, and the wheres. So that's when I started to really explore what I could do, who I could be, where my next path in life might take me. And again, I was very fortunate to get given two books that radically changed my life. The Alchemist was one by Paulo Coelho, and the other was a book by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. And a lot of people know her medical book on death and dying, but this was actually her autobiography called The Wheel of Life. And I was, believe it or not, it sounds very cliche, but I really was in the Amazon jungle that Christmas of 1993, sitting under a tree, reading her book, and the light bulb went on. And it went on so fiercely, I jumped up and I said, I've got it, like a eureka moment. Now, I had for years and years and years been making people beautiful on the outside. And with respect, all those models are already beautiful on the outside, but you know the advertising world. So we enhance what we already know, and we sell a product. And there's no shame in that. It works. It's certainly not my place to say that's wrong or bad. It isn't. It just is what it is. But I knew it didn't fulfill me. And I knew that now, reading her book, she was a psychiatrist and she helped people pass from this life to the next. And there was such dignity and grace in what she did and how she did it, that she is a heroine of our time. And I realized I have a gift. People would always come and talk to me about their problems. They'd always tell me how safe they felt with me. And I realized, of course, I'm a natural therapist. I'm a natural counsellor. I'm naturally going to be able to help people feel beautiful on the inside, because that's what, in fact, I had come to see from my own experience of transition. So that's kind of what brought me to the therapeutic world. And I was very excited and jumped on a plane back to England and started to study integrative therapy, which means I pull on all schools of thought, because for me, every storyline has something of value. And I was just very, very blessed to find the right course at the right time at Kent University. And that's how that storyline came to be, that I became a qualified therapist in 2004.
Yeah, again, your story is just very moving. And I want to first, before I say anything else, just honor the bravery that you had in that moment to make another decision, to face your fears and turn them into being brave enough to go after something and live and find your life, and then in turn want to help other people do the same.
Definitely.
Yeah. And then being brave enough to share that story. It's a very intimate experience. I don't know if intimate's the right word, but
it's a beautiful word.
Is it? Okay.
Oh yeah.
It's an intimate experience. And I think it's probably safe to say that there's a lot of people listening that can relate to those moments where maybe you didn't get as far as coming to the edge of the top of the building, but where we have those moments where we question our life and if it matters and if we're strong enough to go on. And
For sure.
It's very funny. I kind of have a similar, like you came so close to death, and in coming close to death, it made you embrace life. And I had a similar experience with my grandma, who you've actually met in a way. So
we haven't talked about that.
Yeah, we haven't talked about that yet. We'll get there. But my grandma was my best friend, and when she passed, I was so confused. It was the first time that I myself had kind of met death or came close to death, built a relationship with death. And I was so confused and so terrified of dying, where I couldn't, oh my gosh, I just couldn't even get through my days. I had an obsessive fear of death. And the way that I turned my life around was, okay, I'm so afraid of this death thing, so I'm going to jump full force into life, into living, to make it well worth it. So I can relate with you there. And
that's beautiful, Danny.
Yeah.
I mean, that really is. That's exactly it. You kind of sidestepped and said, okay, not this, that.
Yes. And I think that can be where a lot of us find those moments where we shift and we believe in ourselves and we go after the thing. It's because sometimes we have to get so close to that darker side. And like you said, the dark night of the soul, like I can definitely, I remember that time for myself.
Yes.
And I used to like look up at the sky and say, what is your point? I remember I'd be like, what are you trying to prove here? Like, I get it. I'm like, come on. But but then it's so beautiful in the end when you can look back and say, okay, I know that had to happen, and I'm so much stronger because of it. And now like everything's so much more beautiful on this end.
Well, I want to be really real about that, because I've actually had 2 more since then, for varying different reasons. So when I say dark nights of the soul, it can be multiple. And I really want to honor that. So some people might be listening and go, yeah, I've had more than one. And I would go, yep, I really put my hands up and hear you, because life affords us that, whether it's loss or trauma or transition that we don't expect, whether it's the loss of a loved one, something fundamental happens in life where we have to then again question our beliefs or views. So I'm always open. Ironically, I'm going to say I never say never, because I don't know whether life's going to afford me another one. And all I do know is I'm still here to talk about them. And I'm certainly still here to help others if they need and want the help to transition through the most difficult storylines that do come and will come and have come into my clinic for the last 16 years since I transitioned. And trauma, again, is often a segue. Well, it can be, let's say that. It can be a segue for incredible growth. And you talked about the word intimacy. And the thing I know, it's interesting you use that word, because in my work, we get very intimate. We really get very intimate. We become very real, very vulnerable, because we are looking and experiencing and working through and processing some of life's worst and most intense storylines. And everything's on a spectrum for me. So, of course, you have got things like extreme complex trauma. You have got PTSD, even complex PTSD, multiple traumas, all the way down to somebody who witnesses someone else's experience and becomes what we call secondary traumatized by the trauma that's happening around them. So there is such a degree of experiences that we can all have as people. And there's a lot of shame, unfortunately, still, and stigma around getting help and seeking help, certainly in the therapeutic arena. It's better. It's much better than it was. And I'm really pleased that it's better, that people are now able to acknowledge their suffering and seek help for it. So I'm very, very grateful for that.
That's something I'm grateful for too. And I think there's a big shift that happens when we allow ourselves to ask for the help that we need.
Yes.
It's one thing to be open and to show that vulnerability and intimacy and be willing to learn and explore and have that curiosity. And to give reference, like in my life, when I really started to want to heal things, it was through yoga and communities and me expanding my mind and taking in information. But I actually this week just reached out to the listeners may know the Dr. Nicole Anders from my first episode.
Yes.
And I'm going to see someone in her clinic for therapy. And
that's so exciting.
Yeah, I'm actually really excited. I would have never thought I'd be excited, but I'm excited to talk about a lot of the things that I've never talked to someone professionally about. And so yesterday I was looking at my health benefits because I'm in sort of like a new job. And you say there's a shame and stigma around getting help. And I think as a society, it's not something that we really prioritize or applaud. Or even in this country, I'm looking at my health benefits, and on any of the plans that I could have chosen, let's just say they don't make it easy or affordable to go. Like there's a section that says mental health service, and they don't make it easy. And it just made me think, like, it should be prioritized. And I mean, gosh, we're in this year where I think trauma is so like in our face, being asked to deal with it because we want to heal from it, but there's so much information out there too. So I can imagine for everyone listening, because for myself, it's like, how do we know, which type of therapy is good and who to go to and how to get there? So I'm glad that you're here. Maybe we can talk about some of that stuff.
Absolutely.
But because it can be overwhelming. I mean, there's so much out there, but I know what I read about your work is that it does work. It really is helping a lot of people.
Well, it is actually one of the most researched, fortunately, and I love that it is, and highly recommended forms of therapeutic treatment available today. And it's relatively new, of course, that's the other thing. So it only really, so I'm going to talk about EMDR just so that listeners know what we're talking about here. So EMDR is let's say what it means. So it's an acronym for eye movement, desensitization, and reprocessing. And it's a really unusual therapy in regard to how it works and what happens, because we're using bilateral stimulation. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means activating left-right hemispheres of the brain. And what's so fortunate, really, in the time that it's come out, is that we now have the ability to see those neurobiological changes through brain studies, EEG studies. So we're actively watching it in real time transition. And for me, a lot of us need to know, we want to know that it works. And I wanted to know that it worked, because even though I was an integrative therapist for many, many years, and I became a coach, so I had these two hats, and I loved it, and I loved what I did as a talk therapist, and I got some really, really great outcomes. I always felt like something was fundamentally missing, like the icing on the cake. And I looked into all sorts of specialized therapies, the CBT, somatic therapy. I did a lot of research, went to King's College in London, England, to do some CBT up to master's level. And again, I really genuinely believe that everything has value. So this is never about me denouncing anything, ever. And again, different people at different times of their lives are ready for different experiences and different therapies. So EMDR is often, in many ways, the last resort. It's like people come to it when they've done a lot of other stuff, or they've heard of it, or someone's done it, and then they'll come to me and they'll say, well, I've been recommended to you, or I've heard about it, and I'm really intrigued. And I say, okay, so really what I'm getting is that trauma is again on a spectrum. We talked about that earlier, that some people are coming with multiple traumas, and some people might be coming with just a one-off acute trauma. And this is, I think, the misconception with EMDR is a lot of people hear it's very, very fast and amazingly quick. And that can be true. If I am just processing with one acute trauma, I can process, and the trauma can be processed within under 6 hours. That's true, no matter how big that trauma might be. So that's in many ways, that may feel quite miraculous, because in some ways it is. Some people would have spent years talking about that trauma, like years in therapy, talking about it. And what we now know about talk therapy, or any kind of therapy in many ways for complex trauma, is that the more we talk about it, the more it embeds it neurologically. So people may feel better because they're being held in that therapeutic relationship environment, and they may feel like they're being heard. But what it in fact does is we learn through repetition. So the more we talk about something, the more it embeds. So invariably people don't get better, they may even get worse. So then that's the unfortunate piece here. So I often get people who've been in therapy for years, and they're saying, I've talked about this trauma, I've talked about it, and really the symptoms are the same, if not worse. So what I know about that is that this is not talk therapy. EMDR is trauma therapy, so it's different. It has an 8-phase treatment. That's what it is. And we have a very specific protocol that we go through, whether it's acute trauma or whether it's trauma that you've had, multiple traumas that date back to childhood. It really doesn't matter. We still follow the same protocol. But by definition, obviously, trauma that's older and longer will take longer to process. Still not as long as most talk therapies, but realistically, it's quick, but it's still not that quick. So I have to kind of dispel some of the myths. It is an extraordinary therapy. I mean, when I don't want to sound, well, I do, because I do sound, but the reality is I have seen miracles in my clinic room of people that haven't been able to do things for years and years and years, and now can do them. I had one client in particular who had, from the age of 3, had suffered with claustrophobia and hadn't been able to get on a train, on a plane for, decades. And we processed his claustrophobia, and he would contact me from the different countries that he had been able to fly to. And he came to me when he was 60. So this was someone who never thought he was going to be able to overcome, and he did. And that to me is just worth anything and everything. It was extraordinary. It's beautiful. I go to bed at night smiling, knowing that that gentleman is now with his grandchildren, can take his grandchildren wherever he wants in the world, and is no longer limited to having to know where this is in a hotel and only being able to stay on the ground floor. And not being able to leave England, because this was in my clinic in England. So it is an extraordinary therapy for trauma and for transitional trauma.
What's up, you guys? Quick second to shout out my friends at Four Sigmatic, and then we'll get right back into the show. Four Sigmatic makes coffees and elixirs and things that are blended with the superpower of mushrooms. Magical mushrooms. Not those kind of mushrooms, but adaptogenic mushrooms that are magical for the body. So I just love drinks when it comes to juices or teas or elixirs. I love having my drinks in the morning, whether it's coffee, chai, whatever. So making the switch to Four Sigmatic has been incredible for me because I know I'm going to drink it anyways. So now that I'm drinking their products, I can guarantee that everything is USDA certified organic. They blend everything with adaptogenic mushrooms, all different kinds to help support your body in different ways. And everything is just so healing for the immune system, our gut, and for lowering inflammation and just helping our bodies adapt to stress, which is so important right now in this global pandemic we're going through, but just in everyday life. Why not boost your immune system and keep your body strong and have it taste delicious in the process? So my top favorite items this week would probably be the chai tea latte, so good, and then the golden milk latte. They come in instant packets that are just a powder form. Pour hot water over it, and then I love to put it over ice and pour a little bit of a splash of vanilla creamer and maybe just a little bit of almond milk. There's coconut milk mixed in them already, but I just love that super creamy taste. So good. And then for their coffee, I love the Think Blend. It's ground coffee with lion's mane and chaga mushrooms, and it gives me that great focus and clarity without having to go back for multiple cups. I don't get that anxious feeling, and the best part, I'm saving so much money. I've ditched the Starbucks and all the coffee shop addictions. I'm making everything at home, and I know that everything is sourced so safely and appropriately, and it's really helping my body thrive. If you guys want to check them out, just use my code DesertMoon, all caps, for 15% off your entire order. Check the show notes to follow the link straight to their website, and let's get right back into the episode. That's amazing that he was able to fly and get over that fear, and that's so cool. I was reading your website, and it talks about the concept of how when we have a traumatic event, the emotions, thoughts, feelings, all of that from that event get stuck in your nervous system. And when I read that, I was just like, I know what that means, because that's kind of how I've been feeling this year, is like, no matter what I do, it's in my body, and I need to process it out, like.
So how I explain it very simply is that if we were to fall over and hurt our body, our arm, let's just say we cut our arm, our natural healing ability kicks in, and our body will heal the arm. And it may take a while, but we'll heal the arm. If some grit or dirt gets into it, then there'll be a problem with the healing process. So it may fester, and then we may need some extra help to get it to be able to heal well, because we need to have the external alien problem removed, and then the natural healing process can happen. And the same's happening neurologically. If we get a storyline that's so overwhelming for our system, it becomes too big to process. and the natural healing system will try and kick in, but it will get stuck, it gets blocked, and it gets locked, unfortunately, into the limbic system. So, in very simple terms, there are three parts of the brain which are greatly affected by experiencing severe or chronic traumatic events, and that's the hippocampus, the amygdala, and the prefrontal cortex. So the amygdala is the brain's fear center, and it helps to store memories, particularly emotional and physical sensations. And it also controls the activation of stress hormones, so the body's fight and flight response. Now, what happens in trauma or complex trauma or PTSD is that the amygdala becomes overactive, causing frequent or near constant high levels of stress hormones. So what that means is that we can't switch off our nervous system. We're on high alert. We can't relax, and we're constantly flooded with those hormones of stress. And this is obviously an issue. So it's a bit like having something in your body and your body's not able to heal because it's overwhelmed. It's too big. It's too shocking. And again, the hippocampus, which is another part of the trauma in the brain, processes our trauma memories by recycling them, if you like, mostly at night through dreams. And this can take place over weeks and months. So in the healthy brain, or the kind of less traumatized brain, it will transfer the integrated store memory to another part of the brain. However, when we have high levels of stress hormones or too much trauma, it causes the hippocampus literally to shrink. And that can result in impaired function. And this is where problems obviously begin, because the more trauma upon trauma upon trauma, the hippocampus becomes overworked and it can't manage it well enough. And that's when things like PTSD can become an issue. So then what happens is those traumas remain unprocessed, fragmented, and it feels current in the person rather than in the past. So what happens when we process trauma, normally it will go from the hippocampus into the long-term memory, and we can remember it, we're just not triggered by it. But when it's locked or stuck in the limbic system, we are constantly triggered by any sight, sound, smell that feels familiar too. And of course, the last part is the prefrontal cortex of the brain. And this part of the brain helps us access our threats, manage emotion, and control impulses. It's like the rational thinking part of the brain. So again, if it's overwhelmed, we can't think properly. And what happens there is when we're flooded by the hormones of stress, so if our nervous system is on or activated, we are in fight, flight, or freeze mode. Now, those stress hormones don't want us to sit and ponder and think. What they want us to do is act, either run the hell away or fight. If I've got a saber-toothed tiger coming at me, I don't want to sit pondering, going, now what should I do? So when we're overwhelmed, we can't think straight. So this is why people say to me, I just can't think. I can't remember. I'm just forgetting things. And what's happening is they're just living in those fight, flight responses. And what EMDR does is help to process the trauma so that the nervous system deactivates. It goes from fight, flight, and freeze into parasympathetic, which is rest and digest. And this is why helping people resource before we start treatment. Now, the resources are very, very important. So things like you talked about, which was yoga, anything that's going to help relax the nervous system is paramount in helping people to get better. So it isn't just EMDR. EMDR, as I said, is part of an innate phase treatment. And it's actually comes at phase 4. So prior to that, I want to get things set up with my people that they have a safe place that they can visualize. They have resources, maybe a healthy, loving figure or a healthy, loving animal that they pull on, that when we visualize these things, it activates something very different in the brain. And what that does is really helps release serotonin. And we want to teach the person that they have the ability to switch off negative hormones of stress like cortisol and adrenaline and get the positive neurotransmitters, the good feeling endorphins, the dopamine and serotonin. And we get those through meditation, through breathing techniques, maybe dancing or singing, exercise, walking, yoga. So what I'm wanting to do is not just do EMDR with people, but obviously help them to help themselves when we're not in the clinic together. This is very, very important. This is self-empowerment. And that's so crucial, I would say, to the ongoing longevity of how somebody lives in the world well. And I hope that makes sense and gives some clarity.
Yeah, and I love that you are wanting to provide those resources, because then it's not like, come to me, Carmel, and give me all of your money and I'm going to just do these therapies. Now go back off into the world. It's like, I'm going to help you, but I'm going to give you these tools to help yourself. Because even, I mean, there's diet and certain foods and exercises that, correct me if I'm wrong, can actually grow the hippocampus, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So, I mean, having those tools and resources, but I know, and I love when trauma and science come into conversation, because I think it's so empowering to know these things. And I just wanted to kind of back up and give an example, because you talked about how certain like sound or scent or whatever it is that could remind you of a triggering event, traumatic event can put you in that trigger state.
Yes.
I had lots of trauma, but my most recent would probably be in the last apartment that I lived in. A lot of things happened there. And it was a very, very traumatic experience. I still, like, if I drive by the area, I'm just like, oh, I like kind of cringe and don't want to even look at it. And so
you're still being triggered. I mean, that's a perfect example. Yeah.
And so my boyfriend and I, we are in the home buying process. We're staying at my family's house because I had to get out of there and just heal and get back on my feet. And anyway, we went to our storage unit a couple weeks ago because all of our stuff from that apartment is in our storage, and we were looking to kind of just move some things around because we're moving soon. So we went there in a totally fine, great mood, getting along, and we were there and we just were like going back and forth and like in a trigger state, like arguing. And it kind of came out of nowhere. And I remember I had someone on the podcast previously, Joyce, who teaches trauma recovery yoga. And she was talking about how the sense or whatever it is can kind of trigger you. And so when we drove away, we're heading to the gas station. We're sitting there in silence because, we're probably both embarrassed, like, okay, what was that? And so I kind of explained to him how, scents and things can put you in that state. And I was like, it's interesting. Like, do you think that's what that was? Because we're around all of our old furniture, all of the things that we had in that apartment where a lot of traumatic events happened. And I think I think it's so empowering to know these things, because let's just say we never knew that information. And I then wanted to say that we fought because my boyfriend did this, or he wanted to say it was because I did this. It not only gives us a little bit of a break and a little bit of compassion for ourselves, but it gives it for others, because we can maybe look at a situation and have more clarity and know, like, okay, it's nobody's fault. It's not the other person that started this thing. It's like, wow, this is still within me, really prevalently within me. If that's how I'm acting when I'm around this thing, like there must still be some trauma in my body that needs some healing. So now I can make the decision to find people that can help me and give me the tools to heal. And you know what I'm saying? So it's
absolutely.
I love that we're learning these things. I love that.
So there's a segue there. It's a beautiful segue that you lead me to, because of course with negative affect, you've got all the five senses can be part of it. So the sight, the smell, the sound, the feeling, the somatic experience of a negative experience. And so you don't even need to leave the room, even though you did leave the room and you went to your old apartment and you got triggered by the things that were there. And it could be a smell, or it could be a sound, and of course this is true for any of us, that anything associated with the trauma, however seemingly small, can activate the nervous system into fight-flight response. And what's really interesting is that the opposite is true too. And I think this is really, really important, that the mind, you can be in your home with your eyes closed and you can think of, like if I'm working with someone who's got a phobia of flying, they don't have to be on the plane to get triggered. All they have to do is think about flying and it activates the fight, flight, freeze response. So they suddenly get flooded. Now they're not even on the plane. So what does that tell us about the brain? Well, it tells us that we can just imagine and we can still trigger and activate the nervous system, even though we're not on the plane. So what that informs us is the mind cannot discern the difference between what it sees and what it imagines. Now, that can be very scary for people because it means that they're going to get triggered all the time with all sorts of what-if thoughts, or maybe that's going to happen and you will get triggered. That's very true. There is a fortunate other side to it. So the other side is that you can also close your eyes and imagine yourself on the most beautiful beach you've ever been on. You can breathe in the scent of the smell of the sea. You can hear and feel the wind and the breeze in your hair. You can feel the warmth of the energy around you or the sun around you. And what that does, of course, is it releases those neurotransmitters of positivity, of endorphins, of dopamine and serotonin. So as much as you can be triggered, we can also, with consciousness and with competency, help ourselves to find those beautiful neurotransmitters as well. And I believe this is the key. So it stops people feeling helpless and powerless and knowing that, yes, they are at the result of their trauma, but it's not all there is. And this is where the resourcing is so important. So you could have come home from that experience and done some beautiful deep breathing and oxygenated your body and your brain and let that go. It would have moved. Or you could have imagined yourself in your favorite place, eating your favorite food, and that would have also released the dopamine and serotonin. So what we do is psychoeducation is to say, I often say to people, go to bed, and you may be going to bed with your partner, and that's lovely, but also take to bed someone who helps you to release the endorphins of dopamine and serotonin. And I have a few favorites that I might recommend. People who do meditation work, who do visualization work, who do relaxation work, because they are going to be the last voice that person hears before they go to sleep. It may be their partner, but as I say, I do joke, there's often in my bed, I've been married for 25 years, there may be three of us in the room, but one's in my headphones and the other's lying by my side. But you get my point. We do have the ability to shift. We are not at the mercy, however it may feel like we are, until we realize that we have the capability that even though the mind cannot discern the difference, what are we feeding it? Can we feed it things that improve it? Yes, yes, and yes. Did I say yes? Just want to activate the yes again. So part of the psychoeducation is, as you rightly said, what we're eating, what we're thinking, what we're watching, what we're reading, where are we dancing, how are we singing, what are we smelling? Get all those senses of making us feel good starts to deactivate. And that's very, very key. That's so, so key. Because as much as I love all my clients, and I do, I'm so busy. I just want to say, please help yourself now and move on and inform yourself, because it's there to utilize. And it really is. And it is a daily practice. I'm not going to lie. It's like cleaning our teeth. But I can't think of anything better. I love doing my breathing every day. And I love doing, whether it's Qigong or yoga or singing or dancing or putting on my favorite music. Who doesn't want the endorphins? Who doesn't want those neurotransmitters of dopamine and serotonin? And they're free. They're free. This is the thing. They are free. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah, and thank you for that tool and that permission and that reminder. And that gives me hope. That makes me, even just hearing that makes me feel more empowered, because it's, of course, I know that these things are good for you, but I like hearing that, okay, like I can be in a trigger and remembering something, and instead of thinking, oh my gosh, I'm just so stressed. This is still so prevalent in my life. Like, when am I ever going to heal? When, instead of spiraling into that thought process of packing on the stress on top of my chest even higher, I can say, okay, wow, that's still within me. Let's go breathe it out. Let's go move it out.
Put on your favorite music and dance, and
I haven't been good at that this year. So, I just want to share that vulnerable piece. Maybe it seems like I do all of these things because of the type of people I have on my show, but I've not been good at that this year. And so I know that it is hard. And like you said, it is a practice, and I'm really trying to give myself that because I deserve it and I should be. But that does give me hope, and it just inspires me. It does. It inspires me with where I'm at right now to know that I can do some healing on my own, like we are so empowered to do it. Yeah.
And even in my clinic, this will hopefully bring a smile to your face. So I set each client, invariably, if they're open to it, we have little goals that we agree on in between sessions. And one of them might be to listen to a podcast every day about a certain subject that they feel will give them those dopamine and serotonin experiences, or to walk the dog, or to do some yoga, whatever it is. And we agree that they're going to send me a little done text with a tick. I have so many ticks coming through the day from all these different people. I have a joke now that, I could write a song called Dun, 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 because it literally is dun, 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 dun. And, but basically what that means is I'm lovingly with them. They're not on their own doing it. There is someone who's wanting the best for them. And we all, with respect, need that encouragement. Me too. I mean, I tell my son every day I've done. And we set little goals each week for each other, because doing it on our own, we do forget. And I'm the first to put my hand up and say, I'm far too busy to go and breathe, or I'm far too, and no, Carmel, this is like nectar. You need to do this. If you want to be the best you can for your people, be the best you can for you. But it's not always easy. So having other people lovingly holding us gently accountable, it gives us that shared experience, that sense of community that you spoke about earlier. And I really love that. And I really welcome that in the clinic. Whatever helps, however it helps. Sometimes clients tell me ways, and I'm like, thank you, because then I can use that as a resource. And everyone's sharing. It's beautiful, Danny. I tell you, it's really beautiful. So I'm very grateful for that. Truly.
Yeah, I think everyone in the world is sharing right now, and it's amazing.
Yeah,
it's amazing. On. Yeah. And I see a lot of people wanting to bring communities together and build support groups. Whether, it doesn't matter what they look like. I'm seeing like people build these accountability groups, support groups, communities, all while the world is shutting down. We found a way to do this even online. And I think there can sometimes be a hesitance that I've seen where people don't want to join a group because it is virtual right now. I just want to talk about this because we have this hope that, or this avoidance, I guess. There's an avoidance of like, oh, this is going to go away. Things will open back up. I'll join the thing later when things go back to normal. I want to be in an environment where I'm around people in person. And I want that too. We want the touch. We want to, experience the essence of the person in person. But it's beautiful that people are creating these resources in this time with what we have, with where we're at right now, because we're living now. Life is happening now. We need to heal now. We need to be our best now. And I'll tell you, I've made some amazing connections virtually. Like I know you, a lot of my guests I've never met in person, and I feel like we've been friends forever. And in my school program, that was 100% online. One of the girls I became so close with. And it's nice to have that accountability and reminder, because it is hard sometimes to slow down and remember to take care of yourself. So whatever you have to do, whether it's sticky note on your bathroom mirror or on a ding on your phone, or maybe you reach out to a friend. I just wanted to kind of offer that for people.
Yes,
we can
yes.
ask for help, and we can maybe build a community if we don't have one around us. We can.
And it is it's loving accountability, and there's never a judgment in it, because sometimes we can't do it. So with my people, I might say, listen, if you can't do it, because listen, I don't always do it. Mm-hmm. So just like a one-liner of what was, I overslept, I had a hangover. I don't care. All I need to know is that I know, and therefore I can just be informed. So I'm with you with that. And do you want to do something about that? No, I'm good with that. Yes, I do. Then either way, we can go from there. So it's just that loving support. And the other thing you're talking about being online. So all my work is now online. I've always done online because I've always done remote work with coaching and with therapy for 16 years. So this is not new for me. But what I do notice is that there are, obviously, initially, people don't necessarily like change, even when it might be helpful. We are creatures of habit. And what I also know is that we get very creative when we get the opportunities of challenge. So people who didn't like it are really liking it. And of course, not everybody, some people want to go, oh, I still want to see you. But a lot of people are going, oh, I really like the fact I don't have to leave home and I can be in my pajamas. And we can process like that. And I'm like, yeah, isn't that just great that you can snuggle down with your blankie afterwards and you don't even have to go anywhere. It's beautiful. And of course, the world becomes much smaller. So my breadth of clientele has grown. So there's like people in countries all over the world now. And that's a beautiful thing. Again, there's always, we can look for the benefits and we can look for the challenge. And I often say to people, my superpower is also my super challenge. So what's your superpower? What's your super challenge? And in the super challenge, that's what we work through, and we build on the superpower. And it's really a lot of fun in that regard. No matter how serious the storyline is, it can also be fun. And I think this is what people are really terrified around trauma therapy. It's like, oh my God, I'm going to get really locked into the trauma. And yes, that's one part of it, but that's not all of it. Absolutely not. We are working with so many aspects and parts of it that we debrief at the end of each session. We go to your chosen safe or sacred or calm or peaceful place. You deactivate, it deactivates the nervous system. You get those beautiful, beautiful neurotransmitters of the feelings associated with that peaceful place, the sounds, the smells. You may have a nurturing, loving figure giving you love, or a protective figure holding your back, or a wise figure giving you wisdom, and then a bubble of light to end on for good measure. I do love my bubbles of light. And it's not from a place of fear, because a lot of people come to me, they got walls up because they've learned that, those walls are the only way I can be safe. And it's like, well, how about a bubble of light that's impenetrable, that's full of light? And you can bounce around the world in it, and you're full of love and full of light and full of joy. How about that for maybe a different way of being in the world? So bubble up is a different thing to a wall, because we all built walls around us. We learned very early on the world's not safe. So how do we then actually integrate with the world from a different place? Well, this is one of the ways we can do that. And it's a lot of fun. I used to say to he's now 21, but to my son when he was young and we'd go out in a busy place and he wasn't keen on too many people, I used to just say, bubble up, baby. And he'd imagine this beautiful bubble of light, and you'd see the smile in his face and his eyes light up because he had a different experience to it. There was no longer fear, like I'm empowered, but I'm feeling good. And that's beautiful. And if we can do more of that in this world, I say thumbs up.
I agree. We put up these walls because we think it's the way to survive, and we want to survive. So it's not a bad thing. We want to exist in this world and survive and be strong. So we think that it's strong to put a wall up. It's strong to push something down because I don't have to think about that. I can just be strong and keep going. But it's
very isolating.
Yeah. And I've noticed now it's like, I think what's strong in my life is wanting to face all of those things that I tucked away and hid away for later, because I couldn't face them. And now that my strength is coming in that intimacy and that vulnerability. And yeah, definitely.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Well, I'm so grateful for this conversation. I mean, I love that we didn't come in with a plan. I had no idea what we were going to talk about today, but I love everything we talked about. I'm so grateful you were willing to teach us something and share your knowledge and your experience. I learned a lot over the past hour. I've been reflecting a lot on my own life. So I know the people listening have been learning too. And yeah, just thank you for doing this and being so supportive. You've been so supportive the whole time. So,
it's been an absolute blessing, and thank you for entrusting me to share. What I would like to say is that you and I'm going to go back a bit here, because you said, how do you know if you're working with someone good, right? So we can get overwhelmed by the choices out there. Mm-hmm. So what I would say is there's certain bodies. For EMDR, you can go to EMDR in America, EMDR Canada, they have a body. In England, there is a body. In Ireland, there is a body. And what those bodies mean basically is that people have either done the basic training or become certified or become a consultant. All the consultants or therapists that have gone on to decide that they want to help train therapists. So that's why they're called consultants. Certified EMDR practitioners are people that have chosen to go above and beyond. And I'm certified for that reason, because I just think it's an amazing, and I really want, I don't care, I'm not always scientific, but magical therapy. It's the nearest to magic I've ever experienced in relation to therapy. So I do see transition. I do see extraordinary things in my work. People that believe they would never be able to do things are able to do things that they thought once was impossible. So from that alone, certification if you feel unsure. And the other thing is, I genuinely offer always a free consultation. And whether I can help someone or not, if someone reaches out to me, they immediately get a free consultation, because I know they're in need, I know they're in fear, and they want help. Now, I may not be able to see them due to the amount of people in my clinic, but what I will do is always refer on or help them with resources and recommend books to read to make sure it is right for them. And again, I can't speak for any other therapists, but I do tell people, go and have as many assessments as you can with people. Make sure they're the right one for you, because it's a big investment. And you need to know that you're working with somebody who really feels right. So do your due diligence. Don't just stop at the first person if they don't feel quite right for you. Check it out. Go around like you would, I don't know, I suppose if you were going to a dentist, you may not just go to the first dentist. You might ask people, get recommendations. I mean, I've never advertised. I'm not going to lie, I've never advertised in 16 years, Danny. All my people come through word of mouth. I am on the EMDR American website. I'm also on the Canadian EMDR website. Because I was accredited in England, I was obviously on their website. But now I'm in North America. I'm with the appropriate bodies here. So anyone that's on the website, they're usually worth at least that first consultation to see if they're a good fit. But if you don't think they're a good fit, trust there are plenty of others. And now the world's opening up. You can go anywhere in the world. So to do it remotely. So please make sure you get the right person that speaks to your heart, that you feel that you can work with, because you are going to be doing, as you rightly said at the very beginning, very intimate work. And I really love the fact that people feel good about who they're working with. That's really imperative.
Yeah, thank you for that permission. I think that's really important too. Can you tell everybody how they can get in contact with you. So I don't think you're on social media, right? Besides
I'm on
Facebook.
I'm not on Facebook anymore. No,
Okay.
I'm actually just on Instagram.
Oh, okay.
I am on Instagram, but my website is www.carmelclark.com. Again, you can find me on EMDR, which is the American EMDR body. You can find me on Canada EMDR body. So again, if you just type in EMDR, you'll find it will come up. Again, it says find a therapist. If you go to either of those bodies, you can put my name, Carmel. There aren't too many Carmels, and I should come up. Other than that, I'm not sure.
Well, and just briefly, so people know, Carmel does offer other services. So if you do feel the call to kind of check out her website and get in touch with her, I'm going to put all of the information below. So make sure you follow and follow that intuitive pull. Maybe we'll have you on another day to talk about some of your other gifts. I mean, she's done some, you do services for psychic mediumship, right?
Yeah, and then that is a whole other conversation. But I think that one of the things, very briefly, is I'm working and just decided to do a PhD in paranormal trauma. So I'm bridging the gap between trauma and paranormal trauma, because it is a thing, and I do get a lot of people coming to me who have been traumatized by the unseen world. So again, I would do as I would with anybody. I need to know what's happening with them. Is it psychosis? Is it depression? Is it anxiety? Is it PTSD? Is it complex PTSD? Is it borderline personality disorder? Is it DID, multiple personality disorder? I need to know what's going on for the person, and we work together to really understand their experience and how I can best help them. So in my world, trauma is trauma. Doesn't matter what the reason for it. What does matter is how we can get you back to health and back to getting your nervous system in alignment with balance and harmony. And there is a kind of segue for me, the book, because there isn't anything of its kind out there, and because I do work with people with that particular trauma, it's of real interest to me. So I've decided that I'm going to take it above and beyond and do a PhD in it, which I think would be really, really interesting, to bridge the gap again between the unseen world and the seen world, and trauma and EMDR. So if any of your listeners out there would like to be part of that, let me know. I'm certainly looking for people who want to get involved. That's an aside, Danny. I have to say that's an aside. But all I know is EMDR is a wonderful, wonderful resource and really does its job. There are also recommended reading that I suggest people who are new to EMDR might want to spend some time just psychoeducating. Getting Past Your Past by Francine Shapiro. She was the originator of EMDR. That's a book I often recommend people. The Brain That Changes Itself isn't really EMDR related, but it is a book about brain science and trauma. So I think it's very important. There is also EMDR, the Breakthrough Movement Therapy for Overcoming Anxiety, Stress and Trauma. That's also by Francine Shapiro. Another one, Tapping In by Laurel Pennell, beautiful book. And The Body Keeps the Score, Brain, Mind, Body in the Healing of Trauma. And that, again, is not EMDR, but it's Norman Dodge, and it's really worth the read if you want to understand more about trauma and how it affects us, mind, body, and so on.
Oh yeah.
I don't think I came up for breath with that bit, but just taking a deep breath in now.
Yeah, that's really cool. I know a lot of people that want to read books all the time. So I will put a list together and put that in the notes as well. So maybe people can just click the links, because that sounds interesting. I want to check that out myself. So excellent.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm so excited we did this, and I really, really appreciate you. And it was an honor. And I am excited to launch this episode. I really am. And listen back to it. I can't wait.
Well, bless your heart, Danny. You're a star. Thank you so, so much for the invitation. I feel very honoured and blessed to be part of your storyline in the beautiful work that you are doing. So truly thank you from me and anyone that comes to me or to anyone for EMDR because of this. Thank you very, very much.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. There you have it, everybody. I hope you were able to learn a little bit more about trauma, why it's so important for us to learn about it, heal from it, the resources that can help us, and just knowing that we can always reach out for support if we don't know which way to go. So thank you so much, Carmel, for sharing some of your wisdom. I know that you are so truly passionate about helping people. I know that this is your mission in this lifetime, and I'm so glad that we cross paths on our journeys here together. So for all of my beautiful listeners that are still here all the way to the end, if you're interested in connecting with Carmel, I'm going to put her social media down below, her website. You can reach out to her, take advantage of the free consultation if you're interested in learning more about EMDR therapy. I'm going to also link all of those books that she recommended below. So if you are interested in purchasing any of those books and learning more about any of the topics, you can just click the link and go straight over there. And that's all I have for you guys this week. Thank you so much for being here, for choosing you, for looking inside of you, for opening your mind and expanding on this journey here with me. I love you guys so, 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 so much, as I always say. And I will see you next time.